In this radio clip, I will talk 3 more distinctive features or the main principles of the constructivism. The first one is the distinctiveness of social facts. For physical materials something like this, or biological materials, you do not need to know the historical, cultural background behind its existence. For instance, if you would like to conduct a research about about a coronavirus, its existence, or how to cure this virus, you do not need to know the history of this virus. Why this virus is called coronavirus instead of it's called a special virus. No, you do not know how the debate of the name of this virus. You do not know why this virus is called new coronavirus or COVID-19 instead of it's called Wuhan SARS. No. Physical, biological materials, they exist without any human consent. They exist naturally. They exist naturally. You do not need to know the cultural, historical, political background for its existence. However, for social facts, you need to know the historical, political, or cultural background for its existence, because social facts are based on human agreement and human institutions. For instance, why a banknote? Physically, a banknote is just a piece of paper. There's no difference between an ordinary piece of paper, say this piece of paper, and a banknote. No physical difference. But why a banknote you could use as a currency? Because this banknote is agreed by the government. Of course, is agreed by the government. The government agreed that this is a currency, and then this currency can use to buy something inside its boundary. Of course, why the government can agree the use of these banknotes is because its people consider this government is legitimate, 有認受性嘅. So it can say this piece of banknotes can be used as a currency of exchange, and then people can agree that to use this piece of banknotes to buy something. You can use this piece of banknotes to buy something. You need to know the historical background for the existence of social facts. I could give you 2 examples why the understanding of history is so important when we study international relations from a constructivist perspective. For instance, like sovereignty. This concept, sovereignty, did not exist, 主權 sovereignty, before 1648, before the signing of Treaty of Westphalia. Why this concept sovereignty exists after the signing of this Treaty of Westphalia? Because in the past, before this 1646, the signing of this Treaty of Westphalia, and the so-called 30 Years' War. The 30 Years' War, the history is so complicated. I don't want to spend any time to talk it in details, because if I would like to talk about 30 Years' War in details, I think I need to spend 6 hours at least. And maybe 6 hours is not enough, because all Hong Kong students, including me, myself, are not very familiar with the history, the historical background. But a very basic background is that after the so-called Reformation, 宗教改革, in European, there are 2 main religions. The first one is Catholic Church, 天主教會, and the second one is Protestant Church. And then the Catholic Church always intervene into the internal affairs of a state on behalf of royal family members of Catholic Church, or on behalf of some people inside the state who believe in Catholic Church, and help those people to fight against Protestant inside the state. And then some state which had already converted to Protestant, they also intervene into the affairs of a state in order to protect the affairs of Protestant believers inside that state. So later, because of the conflict inside the state between Protestant and Catholics, and then this led to a chain effect, so that the Protestant Church, state belief in Protestant Church, wage a war against state belief in Catholic Church, and then they spent 30 years, you can say, world war in European at that period of time, because of the the conflict between Protestant Church and Catholic Church. Then, in order to avoid Protestant Church states belief in Protestants, and also state belief in Catholic Church, to intervene into the internal affairs of a state anymore, so as to avoid the outbreak of war in the future. Then all states joined together and signed the Treaty of Westphalia, and then agree the concept of sovereignty. This concept is that a state is the highest institution inside a piece of land or inside its boundary, and its internal affairs. A state is the highest authority inside a piece of land. No other states can interfere into the internal affairs of a state because of its sovereignty. So state because of sovereignty. So no other state can legally intervene into its internal affairs. This is the beginning of the concept of sovereignty, and this concept of sovereignty laid the foundation of modern international relations. A little bit complicated, this history. This you may not know. I'm also not familiar with. So another example: the special status of Hong Kong. Why Hong Kong is a special administrative region in China? Why China has to execute a one country, two system policy, and also execute high degree of autonomy in Hong Kong? And why foreign countries like USA can intervene into Hong Kong affairs if they consider that this one country, two system is eroding? Why? One of the main, we have to know about the reason for the background, the historical background. That is, Hong Kong was a former British colony, and then Britain handed over Hong Kong to China in 1997 because of the signing of this Sino-British joint agreement. And then in this agreement, Chinese government promised to execute one country, two system in Hong Kong, and then give Hong Kong so-called high degree of autonomy. You have to know this historical background in order to know why foreign powers like U.S., like Japan, like Britain would like to intervene into Hong Kong affairs when they consider that the one country, two system is eroding. Why they intervene in Hong Kong affairs, even though Hong Kong is part of China? You have to know this historical background. And then the third principle is let's say, yes, the second principle, and then this one is the third principle. The third principle is the importance of norm and identity. State interest is not fixed. In realism, for realism, state interest is fixed. Their interest is to protect their own survival, that is, protect their own national security. However, for constructivism, state interest depends on the identity of states. Here, rationalists such as like liberalists and neoliberalists and realists, they think that state policy are guided by a logic of consequence, that is, rationality. They rationally calculate what is important to them. So most states, their most important foreign policy objectives is to preserve their own national security. And constructivists, they don't think so. They think that state interest is derived from their own identity. And this identity will make different norms and understandings. And so these different norms and understandings lay the foundation of state interest. So it is for constructivists, they consider that state policies are not guided by logic of consequences, but guided by logic of appropriateness. That is, constructivists do not consider that state policies are guided by rational calculation. They think that state logic is guided by the concern of legitimacy. And this legitimacy derived from norms, and this norm derives from their identities. I give you a good example. For instance, like when a state joined the United Nations, its identity is a member of the United Nations. So you have to obey the norms set by the United Nations. That is, all members of the United Nations must execute decisions made by the UN Security Council. For instance, like the US Security Council decided to sanction North Korea. Even though this decision somehow is contradictory to China's national interest, if China in so-called rational calculation is contradictory to China's national security, because China would like to preserve North Korea, preserve a strong North Korea, not very strong, but preserve a not very weak North Korea in the Korean Peninsula as a buffer against US, because US, there's some armed force station in South Korea. If North Korea, this country collapse, then the US Army will suddenly go to the border of China. So China must preserve North Korea, must preserve at least a not very too weak North Korea, must prevent the collapse of North Korea, this regime. However, the US sanction, economic sanction, will lead to a near total economic collapse in North Korea, and this may trigger a total collapse of North Korea, this regime, and then suddenly North Korea collapse, and then South Korea unified North Korea, and then U.S. Army may say station on the border of China. However, in you can say rationally, China does not want to sanction North Korea. However, as China is a member of the United Nations, China must comply with the decision made by United Nations Security Council. So even though rationally sanctioning North Korea is contradictory to the China's national interests, however, China still agrees to implement the policy of sanctioning North Korea. Okay, there are two types of laws. The first one is regulative laws. That is, this type of laws regulate already exist activities like rules for the road determines how to drive. That is, driving when I don't know whether this is Edison. I don't know, but say maybe Edison, he invents car. Then the invention of cars, of course, someone will drive the car. So driving cars exist before those kind of rules for road. Those rules of roads is to regulate some already exist activities, like smoking exists for a very long period of time. Exists, as I know, is since Colombia discovered America. This kind of cigarettes discovered in America. So this habit had existed since Colombia, its team discovered cigarettes. However, regulation of smoking exists in the 20th century in order to protect the health of non-smokers. Okay, so regulate already existing activities. Constitutive rules is to create the very possibility of these activities. For instance, before sovereignty, this concept, state affairs is always intervened by outside force, like the Pope, Gao, can determine who succeeds a throne before the invention of this concept of sovereignty. But with this invention of sovereignty, then it laid the foundation of the existence of a sovereign state, which internal affairs cannot be intervened by an outside force. For instance, in ancient period China, the China emperor can determine who succeeds the throne of Korea and also who succeeds the throne of Vietnam. But now, because of the invention of this concept of sovereignty, so China leaders cannot determine who can be the leader of Korea, who can be the leader of who succeeds the position of leader of Finland. Okay, legitimacy of power. State interest is determined by the consideration of legitimacy. So legitimacy is the form of power. This form of power is a kind of ideational power. It's kind of ideational power. Because it is believed, legitimacy is a belief that acts according to the pursuing values of broader international community. That is, a state decide that they must do something in order to comply with the existing values or the prevailing values of the whole international community. This is legitimate power. The greater the legitimacy, the easier that it can convince others to cooperate. The less the legitimacy, the more costly the action. Because greater why legitimacy in power is because if an action of is legitimate, the other action then other states will be willing to cooperate. If this action is illegitimate, the other states do not want to cooperate. Very good example is U.S. In 2003, again, the Iraq war. U.S. does not get the consent of the UN Security Council to launch a war against Iraq. So this war is legitimate. That's why a lot of states did not want to cooperate with U.S. in this war, and that's the reason why later U.S. faced such a strong opposition inside Iraq. A lot of guerrilla force ambush attack U.S. armed force inside Iraq. The main reason is because Iraq action is legitimate, and a lot of states do not want to cooperate U.S. So those states do not, firstly, join U.S. armed force to invade Iraq, and also to station in Iraq to protect the security of Iraq. So U.S. has to mainly rely on itself to ensure the security of Iraq. That's the main reason why U.S. force later face so many attacks, and U.S. have to face those attacks themselves. And secondly, because those states do not want to share so-called the intelligence with U.S. That's why U.S. do not know where does this where did those terrorists hide? Where did those terrorists launch the attack? So you say legitimacy is very important. Even U.S. so strong, if it's actually without legitimacy, then others they don't want to cooperate with U.S. And then this ends up in that U.S. will even U.S. itself face a very you can say a high degree of difficulties if its action is not legitimate. And also another is so-called layman and shaming legitimate power, because WHO is legitimate, so it can issue the travel warning. When a state faces travel warning, then others will not. Other state citizens will not visit that state, and that state tourism will face a big problem. So this is also a form of legitimacy power. So power, according to Constructivism, do not just limit to coercive power, but also knowledge power, and also the power of fixing some meaning. Say travel warning is a kind of power to fixing meaning, fixing of meanings. That is, if the WHO issue travel warning, then it's given meaning to a state that this state is in danger, and then no tourists will go to that state. And also, knowledge power is also include how knowledge power. Another form of knowledge power is to differentiate rewards and capacities. I give a good example. If in development is defined as per capita GDP, like in China, then this country will opt for industrialization because they want to increase the GDP. But however, if development is defined as basic needs met, then, like for instance, like some Scandinavian states, they do not want to pursue any GDP growth anymore. They want to pursue a better life, like small agricultural initiatives, in order to help their country, their residents, to live a better life. Okay, let me see. Yes. Anarchy. Make it very simple. And realists, they think that anarchy is the same for all states. All states face the same anarchy. All states have to maintain the survival in this anarchy. However, for constructivists, they think that anarchy is different. And anarchy of friends differs from anarchy of enemies. Why? Like Canada and US, they're friends. But of course, they these two states are not governed by so-called super state institutions. No super state institution govern the relations between U.S. and Canada. However, U.S. and Canada, they do not consider that the use of armed force, the use of armed force can be a method to settle their conflicts. However, the annex is the same. Like China and Taiwan, not China and U.S. China and U.S. There's no super state authority to govern the relations between China and U.S. However, China and U.S. have to prepare for the use of armed force as a method of last resort, 最後手段 to settle their conflicts. So anarchy is different for friends from one of enemies. Culture. Constructivists consider that culture is very important because culture can inform the meaning that people give to the action. Study international relations, you need to study culture because cultural context is very important, like human rights. You have to know the cultural background and also the historical background. Why the Western states, including U.S., put so much focus on the issue of human rights. It's because of the so-called the genocide, 殺啲猶太人 in the Second World War. The large-scale, as a genocide, yes, genocide of Jews in the Second World War. I give you a very good example. If we do not refer to example of international relations, there's also more ordinary examples, like kissing. In Western society, a man kiss a female. It may just be a gesture of friendship. However, you cannot kiss a friend. But in Hong Kong, in Chinese society, we think that kissing is just an activity for boyfriend and friends, for lovers. However, in Western society, they think kissing is not limited. This gesture is not limited to boyfriend, lovers. It's also a gesture of friendship. Okay. See you next time.